Welcome to Slumbertainment. If you drift off during this story, consider leaving a like when you wake up. I'd love to hear what you think of it, and whether you'd enjoy more stories like this one in the comments. Now, let's begin the sleep story, Beggar's Luck. Altdorf stank of sweat, sewage and lies, but Yandolf Hertler had long since made peace with all three. The smell of a city meant life. Life he could scavenge, cheat and trick his way through. And in Altdorf's gutters, a clever man might even find something like fortune, provided he didn't look too closely at what it cost. Yandolf wasn't what anyone would call handsome. His hairline had surrendered years before, retreating like a routed regiment across the bare field of his scalp. A nose too long, a chin too small, and a face like a bruised pear made him blend nicely among beggars. At 35, his joints cracked when he crouched, and his beard, scraggly, streaked with grey, itched constantly, but his eyes still burned with mischief, sharp and alert, forever scanning for opportunity. That morning he sat by the steps of the Temple of Sigmar, bowl in hand, muttering his usual curses under his breaths. It was safer than praying out loud. The Sigmarites didn't take kindly to competition. Mercy for a hungry soul, he croaked to a passing merchant. The man ignored him. Yandolf spat on the cobbles. Mercy's a coin without a face, he muttered, and that's why no one spends it. As if to prove him wrong, a small clink sounded at his feet. A coin, silver, glinting like a star fallen from heaven. He blinked. No one was near enough to have dropped it. He picked it up, turning it in his palm. The coin bore the twin-tailed comet of Sigmar on one side, a hammer on the other. He flipped it once. It landed heads up. At that precise moment, a city watchman strode past, one who, Yandolf knew, had been hunting for a beggar who'd stolen a meat pie from the docks. The watchman glanced around, then up. Just as a pigeon, apparently smitten with divine timing, dropped a white splatter directly onto his helm. The man cursed, stumbled, and tripped over Yandolf's outstretched legs. His keys jangled loose and fell neatly into Yandolf's lap. The beggar froze, eyes wide. He hadn't planned that. Couldn't have. He grinned. "Well," he whispered, "that's what I call luck." He spent the rest of the day testing it. He found a half loaf of bread under a barrel. He avoided a runaway cart by mere inches, and when he ducked into a tavern to escape the rain, the innkeeper mistook him for a long-lost cousin and gave him a tankard on the house. By dusk, Yandolf had gone from penniless to positively giddy. Sitting in the shadows of the docks, he examined the coin again. Heads for fortune, tails for ruin. That was the way of life in Altdorf. Every toss a gamble. But for once the coin seemed loaded in his favour. That night he dreamed. He stood in a great hall, walls hung with playing cards and dice that floated in the air like stars. A figure lounged upon a throne of stolen purses, clad in motley black and white, half smile, half shadow. The figure flipped a coin between long fingers. It spun endlessly, neither landing nor falling. "Yandolf Hertler," the figure said, voice like laughter behind a locked door. "You're a slippery one. I like that." Who are you?" Yandolf stammered. The figure grinned. "Call me a friend, call me Fortune, call me Ranald." The coin flashed, and for an instant Yandolf saw himself reflected in it, not as a beggar, but as a man dressed in dark finery, rings on his fingers and a glint in his eye. "You've got the knack," Ranald said. "You see the trick in the world, the lie that keeps it spinning. Keep your wits sharp, your hands quicker, and your heart lighter than your purse. I'll be watching." The coin flew toward him, spinning faster, faster, and Yandolf woke with a start, clutching something cold in his hand. The same coin, the same glint. He laughed, a strange giddy sound. "Well then," he said to the empty room, "if the gods have decided to notice me, it's about time it was the right one." The next morning, Altdorf's markets bustled with the usual chaos. Fishwives shouting, apprentices brawling, merchants swearing. Yandolf moved through it all like smoke. He'd traded his beggar's rags for a cleaner tunic stolen from a drying line, washed his face in the fountain, and even polished the coin he now wore on a string around his neck. At a potion seller's stall, he paused to watch an old man haggling with customers over bottles of cloudy fluid. The apothecary's hands trembled with age, and Yandolf could see several of the bottles were mislabelled. An idea took root, bold, foolish, perfect. By dusk, Yandolf had convinced the apothecary he was a journeyman herbalist fallen on hard times. Within days he'd learned the trade: herbs, oils, tonics, and how to charge the rich thrice what the poor could afford. And in time he began adding his own twists, subtle changes, little jokes only Ranald would appreciate. To the pompous merchant who bragged about his gout, Yandolf sold a draught that turned the man's skin a cheerful shade of green for a week. To the greedy tax collector, he gave a cure that induced unstoppable flatulence in the middle of sermons. But to the coughing child of a dockhand, he gave the real medicine freely and slipped away before thanks could find him. Each night he flipped his coin and whispered, "For luck, for laughter, for Ranald." The other beggars began to notice. Coins seemed to find him. Dice landed his way. Even the rats left his scraps untouched. They started calling him Lucky Yandolf, and though he scolded them for blasphemy, he wore the name like a charm. Still, luck had a way of drawing attention. One evening, as he closed the shutters of the apothecary's shop, a shadow blocked the door. A cloaked figure stepped in, tall, hood drawn low. "You've been meddling, Hertler," said a rasping voice. "People talk of you, the kind of talk the watch doesn't like." Yandolf's hand went instinctively to his coin. He smiled faintly. "I'm a healer, friend. I mend bones, not laws." The figure tossed something onto the counter, a small vial. Inside the liquid shimmered silver. "Then you'll mend this," the man said, and turned to leave. Yandolf picked up the vial. Its stopper bore a symbol: 2 crossed keys over a coin. He knew it at once. Ranald's sign. He looked toward the door, but the stranger was gone. For the first time in years, Yandolf felt his pulse race not from fear, but from purpose. The god of luck had sent him a message, and somewhere out there, others wore that same mark. He flipped his coin once more. It landed on its edge and refused to fall. Yandolf smiled. Ranald was watching. Yandolf Hertler had always believed that knowledge was just another kind of theft. You stole it from your betters, hid it away, and prayed they didn't notice. Now, working under old Master Wintler, Altdorf's most dubious apothecary, he stole it daily. The shop sat near the river, where the air was thick with rot and the stink of tanneries. Inside, shelves sagged with jars of dubious content: leeches, dried mushrooms, pickled eyes that might once have belonged to men. The mortar was blackened from too many failed experiments, and the rafters were alive with squeaking rats. "Measure, don't guess," barked Wintler, slapping Yandolf's hand with a stirring rod. "Do you want to kill a man or cure him?" "Depends on the man," Yandolf muttered. The old apothecary squinted at him. "What?" "Nothing, master. Just thinking aloud." Truth was, Yandolf was thinking constantly these days, about the coin that never left his pocket, about the hooded man with the silver vial, about Ranald's smirk in his dreams. Every night he heard laughter somewhere behind his thoughts. a laugh that made mischief feel like prayer. He'd learned enough from Wintler to start brewing on his own. The old man barely noticed. His eyes were fading, and his hands shook so much he sometimes spilled mercury on the floor. Yandolf worked by candlelight after hours, experimenting with new mixtures. Truth serums that didn't tell the truth, love potions that caused hiccups, and sleeping draughts that gave vivid dreams of flying dice and spinning coins. He never sold these to the poor. The poor didn't need trickery. The world tricked them enough already. His customers were merchants, bailiffs, taxmen, and the occasional noble's mistress, folk who thought they could buy their way out of fate. Those were the ones Yandolf reserved his real genius for. One afternoon, a portly burgher waddled in, his rings so thick they clinked when he pointed. "My foot's swollen," the man complained. "Gout. Nasty business. My physician says avoid pork, but what does he know? I'll pay double for a cure that lets me eat what I please." Yandolf's smile was slow and saintly. "Of course, good sir, I have just the remedy. Expensive, but blessed by he caught himself, by the gods. He mixed a concoction of alum, bile, and a secret pinch of dye from the Painters' Guild. "Drink 1 cup a night," he said. "It will draw the poison from your humours." 3 days later, the burgher's skin had turned a delightful shade of swamp green. He stormed back to the shop, demanding a refund. Yandolf sighed piously. "Ah, yes, the purification process. Green is a good sign. It means your sins are leaving through your pores." Wintler nearly wept laughing when the man left, muttering about divine punishment. "You're a wicked little rat, Hertler," he said. "Ranald himself would wink at you." Yandolf only smiled. He didn't need to be told twice. But there were other days, quieter ones, when mischief gave way to mercy. A girl of perhaps 10 came one evening, barefoot and thin as a reed. "Please, sir," she said, "my brother's coughing blood. Mam says it's the plague." Yandolf looked down at her, at the dirt under her nails, at the fear in her eyes. He thought of his own childhood in the alleys, of begging for bread and getting boot leather. "Bring him here," he said, "and don't tell anyone." The boy arrived near midnight, shivering and pale. Yandolf mixed honey, wormwood, and willow bark, muttering prayers to Ranald between ingredients. He had no idea if the potion would work. He only knew he had to try. When the boy's breathing eased and colour returned to his cheeks, Yandolf felt something stir in his chest. A rare warmth, fragile as a candle flame. He flipped his coin. Heads. "Good lad," he whispered. "Ranald's watching." Word spread. Some called him a miracle worker. Others said he was a charlatan who preyed on fools. Both were right, but in the filth and hypocrisy of Altdorf, right and wrong were just costumes people wore until the watch came knocking. One evening, as the sun bled out behind the rooftops, Yandolf found Wintler slumped at his work table, unmoving. The old man's hand still clutched a pestle, knuckles white. His eyes were open, glassy. Yandolf sighed, placed 2 copper coins on his lids, and said, "You taught me to measure, master. I'll measure the world by your rule. Just enough poison to keep it interesting." He inherited the shop, illegally, of course, and with it, Wintler's debts. When collectors came, Yandolf paid them in counterfeit florins he'd pressed himself, then vanished into the back alleys before they noticed. For months he lived by his wits and brews, each day a toss of Ranald's coin. Then came the night of the fire. It started in the tannery across the lane, a spark in the fat vats. Flames licked the air, spreading fast. Yandolf tried to save what he could, his coin, a few vials, the ledger, but the shop was lost. He stood in the street as smoke swallowed the moon, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to despair. "Is this it, Ranald?" he whispered. "You lift me up just to drop me again?" A voice came from behind him. "That depends how you land." Yandolf turned. A woman in a patchwork cloak leaned against the wall, half her face hidden beneath a hood. Around her neck hung the same symbol he'd seen on the silver vial, 2 crossed keys over a coin. "Who are you?" he asked. "A friend," she said, smiling. "A follower of the Laughing One. You've been noticed, Yandolf Hertler. The god's hand is heavy on your shoulder." He frowned. "Then maybe he should lift it before I break." She laughed softly. "He doesn't choose the comfortable priest. He chooses the clever." "Priest?" Yandolf blinked. "You've got the wrong man." "Do I?" She tossed a coin at him. It spun, caught the firelight, and landed in his palm, heads up. "When you're ready to gamble with more than your life," she said, "find the Silver Rat Inn behind the Weaver's Quarter. Ask for the table with no dice." Then she was gone, swallowed by smoke and laughter. Yandolf stared after her, the coin gleaming in his palm. For a long time he didn't move. Then slowly he grinned. "The Silver Rat," he murmured, "a fine name for a den of thieves." He flipped his own coin and caught it mid-air. "Tails for ruin, heads for glory," he said. "Let's see what luck thinks of me tonight." The coin landed on its edge again, and Yandolf Hertler walked toward his fate. The Silver Rat Inn was the kind of place respectable men pretended didn't exist. Hidden behind the Weaver's Quarter, its door was marked only by a rat painted in silver leaf. Half faded, half scrubbed off by the watch more times than Yandolf could count. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, dice clatter, and the sweet tang of cheap brandy. Yandolf hesitated only a moment before entering. He had no shop now, no home, and no friends worth the name. Ranald's coin still hung at his throat, warm against his skin, and that was reason enough to follow wherever luck led. He approached the barkeep, a square-jawed woman with a scar running from her temple to her chin. "I'm looking for a table," he said softly, "with no dice." She froze for half a heartbeat, then jerked her head toward the back. "Cellar door's yours." The stairs creaked under his boots as he descended into darkness. Voices drifted up, laughter, murmurs, the shuffling of cards. A single lantern burned below, lighting a round table surrounded by 5 figures cloaked in shadow. The woman from the fire was among them. "So," said one, a man with gold teeth that gleamed when he smiled, "this is the apothecary who turned a burger green and robbed the dead without being caught." Yandolf spread his hands. "You make me sound industrious." The woman chuckled. "Ranald prizes industry when it serves mischief. Sit, Yandolf Hertler. We've been expecting you." He sat, trying not to stare at the symbol carved into the table's surface. 2 crossed keys over a coin, the mark of Ranald. Around it, smaller etchings, dice, daggers, and coins. It wasn't a gambling den, it was a shrine. The gold-toothed man poured a measure of wine and slid it toward Yandolf. "Drink to fortune," he said, "and to the god who deals the cards." Yandolf raised the cup. "To Ranald," he said, and drank. The wine burned like liquid laughter. They told him stories that night, of tricksters who outwitted witch hunters, of thieves who stole from Graf Todbringer himself and lived to boast of it, of gamblers who'd lost everything only to win it back thrice over, and always the name of Ranald was whispered with reverence and mirth. "Luck isn't given," said the woman, "it's taken. That's what our God teaches. The world's a game, and most folk don't even know they're playing." Yandolf smiled. "Then let's play better." The Ronaldians laughed and welcomed him with open arms. They taught him the tenets of their faith, not the kind preached from temples, but the kind whispered over dice and wine. Never kill unless you must. Never cheat the poor. Never take more than you need. Unless the marks are noble, in which case take everything. He learned their signs and passwords, the way to pass unseen through the streets, how to forge a seal or mimic a signature. He learned that lies, when told well, were a kind of art, and truth, when spoken cleverly, could be the sharpest lie of all. Within weeks, Yandolf had half a dozen names and faces. To the market folk, he was Dr. Yannick, healer of gout and grief. To the watch, he was Father Hendel, a travelling preacher from Newln. To the gamblers, he was Lucky Hans, the man whose dice never betrayed him. And to the poor, he was simply Yandolf, the man who left bread by the doors of the hungry when no one watched. The disguises became his armour. Every mask he wore let him move through the world untouched. He came to love it, the thrill of deception, the dance between truth and lie. Sometimes he'd catch his reflection in a mirror or a puddle and pause, trying to remember which face was real. One night the Rinaldians met again in the cellar. Goldtooth was drunk and laughing, telling a story of how he'd swapped a noble's ring for a painted fake. "Ranald blesses those who make fools of the proud," he said, clinking his cup against Yandolf's. "Speaking of fools, our friend here's got a knack for it. The watch has been chasing Father Hendel for 2 days. Saw them drag some poor sod off the docks this morning." Yandolf raised a brow. "And what did this poor sod look like?" Goldtooth grinned. "Like you." They all roared with laughter. Yandolf smiled thinly, though something in him tightened. For all their jests, he knew the danger was real. Every lie had a price, and sooner or later the bill would come due. After the meeting, he lingered behind, staring at the Ranald symbol etched in the table. "Am I your priest, then?" he murmured. "Or just another fool you're fattening for the slaughter?" The lantern flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw a shadow grin back at him. The months passed. His fame, or infamy, spread through Altdorf's alleys. He healed when he wanted to, conned when he must, and never once lifted a blade in anger. Once he talked 3 footpads out of stabbing him by convincing them they'd already been cursed with bad luck if they touched him. They fled screaming when a tile happened to fall from a roof behind him. Luck, or something more. He'd begun to feel untouchable. That, he later realised, was the surest sign Ranald was about to remind him he wasn't. The trouble began with the merchant Forstmann, a pompous fool who bragged about cheating his partners and buying absolution from the priests of Sigmar. Yandolf sold him a rejuvenation draught, a potion that promised youthful vigour. What it gave instead was an unfortunate swelling in the nose and ears that lasted 3 weeks. Forstmann, humiliated, accused Yandolf of poisoning him. When the watch came, Yandolf had already changed his name and moved lodgings, but one of his aliases, Father Hendel, had been seen leaving the apothecary's ruins weeks earlier. The watch connected the dots, wrong ones though they were. The chase through Altdorf's alleys was the stuff of legend. Yandolf leapt fences, scattered market stalls, and vanished into the river's fog. The watch caught no one, but rumours spread of the lucky priest, Ranald's chosen, who mocked the law and lived to laugh about it. When he returned to the Silver Rat, dripping wet and grinning, Goldtooth clapped him on the back. "Ranald's with you, Hertler. You can't die till the gods bored of you." "Then I'd better keep him entertained," Yandolf said. The woman nodded approvingly. "You've proved yourself. Ranald smiles on you tonight." She reached into her cloak and drew forth a silver token, shaped like a coin but engraved with a rat's face. "You're one of us now, priest of the laughing god." Yandolf stared at the token. The word priest sat strangely in his ears. "Priests preach," he said. "I gamble. Exactly, she replied, and that's why you'll do nicely. That night Yandolf dreamed again. He stood before Ranald's throne of purses and dice. The god leaned forward, his grin wide. Priest, thief, liar, healer, Ranald said. You're all the same coin, Yandolf Hertler. Keep spinning and never stop. Yandolf bowed. What happens when I fall? Ranald laughed. Then I'll flip you again. When he woke, the coin on his chest was warm to the touch. He smiled into the darkness. Ranald was still watching, and the game was only beginning. The silver rat was not what it appeared to be. To most of Altdorf, it was a tavern where gamblers drank, thieves lied, and fortune came and went faster than wine. But beneath the floorboards, behind hidden doors and clever locks, it was something more. A temple to the god of luck, trickery, and thieves. Yandolf discovered this by accident, or perhaps by design. He had been asked by Goldtooth to fetch a crate of brandy from the cellar. When he moved aside a barrel to reach it, he found the floor oddly hollow beneath his boot. A hidden latch clicked open, revealing a stairway spiraling down into darkness. The smell of incense and candle smoke drifted up, an unholy scent made of burnt wax, old coins, and laughter. He hesitated for only a heartbeat. Curiosity, after all, was a Ronaldian virtue. He descended. At the bottom he found a cavernous chamber lit by flickering lanterns. The walls were painted with murals. Ranald in his many guises: gambler, jester, thief, beggar, and even nobleman. Each face wore the same grin. At the centre stood an altar of polished stone, upon which rested a single coin balanced on its edge. Around it, dozens of figures knelt in silent prayer. Yandolf had seen temples before, gilded halls of Sigmar, firelit shrines of Ulrich, but never anything like this. The air itself seemed to hum with hidden laughter. One of the kneeling figures turned. It was the woman from the fire, her hood down now. Her hair was raven dark, her face pale, her eyes sharp as broken glass. You found us sooner than I thought, she said. I wasn't looking, Yandolf replied. That usually means I'm in the right place. She smiled. Ranald leads his own, always by accident. The congregation rose. Goldtooth was among them, and several others Yandolf knew from the gambling tables. Merchants, cut purses, even a watch sergeant he'd once bribed. All of them bowed slightly, not to him, but to the coin still balanced on the altar. The woman gestured for silence. Brothers and sisters, she said, her voice echoing softly, Ranald sends us a sign, a man favoured by the Laughing One himself. He cheats the proud, feeds the hungry, and walks through the watcher's nets without a scratch. Tell me, is that not divine? The congregation murmured agreement. Goldtooth grinned. Aye, he's got more luck than a cat in a tannery fire. The woman stepped toward Yandolf, eyes gleaming. What say you, Hertler? Have you heard the gods call? Yandolf hesitated. Every instinct screamed run. The last time someone had spoken of calls and faith, he'd been starving on temple steps, ignored by Sigmar's priests. Yet here, in the smoke and shadows, he felt something different. A warmth, a humour that whispered, you already belong. He reached into his tunic and drew out his coin. I don't know about calls, he said softly, but Ranald's been flipping this one for me since I was born. The woman took the coin and placed it beside the one on the altar. The two coins spun together, perfectly balanced, neither falling nor colliding. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Ranald's touch, someone whispered. The woman smiled. Then it's settled. By luck and laughter, Yandolf Hertler is named priest of our order. The congregation broke into cheers, some sincere, some mocking. Goldtooth clapped him on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Father Hertler. May your sermons be short and your luck long." Yandolf could only stare at the two spinning coins. When they finally fell, both landing heads up, he felt a tremor run through him. Ranald was watching. The following weeks passed in a blur of new responsibilities. Yandolf learned the deeper rituals, the prayers muttered over stolen goods, the secret blessings before a gamble, the signs to ward off ill fortune. He learned to read omens in the roll of dice and to sanctify thefts that served the poor. The den of Ranald became his new home. He slept in a narrow cot beneath the murals, tended candles, and offered counsel to those who sought luck or forgiveness. He found that people trusted a man who smiled when they confessed their sins. Even thieves needed absolution, if only to start stealing again with a clear conscience. "Ranald doesn't demand obedience," he told a trembling cutpurse one evening. "Only wit. You steal for greed, you're a fool. You steal for need, you're one of his." The man looked up, eyes wide. "And if I steal for laughter?" Yandolf grinned. "Then you're his favourite." He became known as the Laughing Leech, the priest who healed wounds and lightened purses in equal measure. He used his apothecary's skill to concoct charms of fortune, perfumed oils that made dice tumble kindly, powders that dulled the eyes of the watch, tinctures that caused nobles to sneeze uncontrollably during sermons. One such noble, a pompous judge named Hauer, became his greatest source of amusement. The man had condemned half the den's gamblers in his court. Yandolf visited him in disguise, posing as a physician from Talabheim. He claimed to have a cure for chronic righteousness, a condition brought on by excessive piety. Hauer, too vain to question it, drank the potion greedily. For 3 days he could do nothing but hiccup every time he tried to pronounce the word justice. The city laughed for a week. The den offered Yandolf free drinks for a month. "Ranald must be proud," Goldtooth said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. Yandolf shrugged modestly. "He does enjoy a jest." But humour, like fortune, was fickle. One night, while Yandolf offered blessings before a dice game, the watch burst through the tavern doors. Crossbows, lanterns, shouts, chaos. Someone had betrayed them. The gamblers scattered. Goldtooth drew a knife. Yandolf's mind raced. He grabbed the nearest wine jug, hurled it at the lanterns, and plunged the room into darkness. Shouts turned to curses. In the confusion, he seized a handful of dice, muttered a prayer, and threw them at the floor. When they struck, they flared with a strange blue light, blinding the watchman long enough for everyone to escape. Later, when the Ranaldians regrouped in the sewers, the woman clasped his arm. "You've saved us, priest. Ranald smiles wider tonight." Yandolf exhaled shakily. His heart was still pounding. "Let's hope he keeps smiling." "Luck like yours," she said, "isn't luck, it's favour." She kissed the coin around his neck and whispered, "You'll do great things before you fall." That night, Yandolf sat alone in the den, watching the 2 coins on the altar spin in the candlelight. He thought of the life he'd led, the alleys, the hunger, the masks, and how every twist had led him here. For once he felt not like a beggar or a liar, but like a man seen by the gods. He flipped his coin. It landed on its edge again. Yandolf smiled. "All right, Ranald," he murmured. "Keep your secrets." Above him, in the flicker of the candles, the painted eyes of the laughing god seemed to wink. Altdorf was a city that never stopped hungering. It devoured the desperate, the hopeful, and the unlucky in equal measure. So Yandolf Hertler decided it was time to leave before it swallowed him whole. He left the Silver Rat at dawn, hood drawn low, his pockets lighter than he liked, but his heart oddly steady. The Rinaldians wished him fortune with the usual mix of sincerity and sarcasm. Goldtooth gave him a hug that smelled of ale and onions. The woman, whose name he had never learned, pressed a small silver token into his hand. "Ranald's smile be upon you," she said. "Wherever dice fall, may they fall your way." He flipped it once, grinning. "They usually do." She arched an eyebrow. "That's what the last lucky man said, the one before he hanged." Yandolf chuckled and stepped out into the sunrise, his coin glinting at his throat. The road awaited, and with it the thousand faces of fortune. He travelled light, living off what luck provided. In one town he won 3 days' meals by curing a merchant's horse of lameness, the cure being a dose of mint and the removal of a pebble from its hoof. In another, he was chased out by a witch hunter after a sermon that began with, "Sigmar bless the poor. He must, since the rich never do." Everywhere he went he left behind stories. The priest who rolled 7 sevens in a row. The healer who made a burgomeister's wig burst into flame during confession. The man who stole a thief's purse just to give it back out of professional courtesy. Ranald's faith, Yandolf learned, wasn't about temples or tithes. It was about balance. You humbled the arrogant and raised the wretched. You lied to reveal truth, cheated to expose greed, and laughed when all else failed. Once, in the town of Hergig, he watched a poor widow lose her last coins to a rigged dice game. The gamblers laughed as she wept. Yandolf joined the table with a friendly smile. "Mind if I play around?" he said, placing his coin on the table. The gamblers eyed him warily. "Priests don't gamble." "Then it's a good thing I'm a bad priest." He rolled. The dice came up 12, again and again. The gamblers' grins faltered. When he left the table an hour later, he handed the widow her money and added 2 extra crowns. As he passed her, she caught his sleeve. "You're a good man, father." He smiled sadly. "No, my dear, just a lucky one." That night he sat by a campfire on the road north, watching sparks twist into the sky. He thought of Altdorf, of the silver rat, of the way those coins had spun without falling. "Are you still with me, old rogue?" he asked the air, "or have you found another fool to bless?" The flames flickered. Somewhere in the dark, a laugh answered, soft, distant, and full of mischief. Weeks turned into months. The empire sprawled before him. Forests haunted by beastmen, villages burned by raiders, noble estates fat with coin and cruelty. He wore many faces, wandering healer, peddler, monk, fortune-teller, and each one drew its own kind of trouble. In Bogenhafen, he outwitted a tax collector by convincing him his ledgers were cursed. The man threw them in the river. In Talabheim, he blessed a gambler's hand so thoroughly that the man nearly got himself killed for winning too often. In a roadside tavern, he was nearly beaten when his healing draught turned out to be vinegar and nettle juice. But when the drinkers began arguing about who'd been cheated worse, he slipped away laughing. Through it all, he kept Ranald's tenets close to heart. Never harm without need, never cheat the poor, and never ever take the game too seriously. But Ranald, as ever, enjoyed testing his servants. It happened on the road to Middenheim. Yandolf had taken shelter at a way-house when a band of armed men rode in, nobles' guards by their livery. They were dragging behind them a bound peasant, a young man accused of insulting his betters. One of the guards, a heavy brute with a scar across his scalp, slammed the man onto the floor. "By order of Baron Weishauer," he declared, "this cur is to hang at dawn." The innkeeper looked away. The other patrons kept their heads down. Only Yandolf spoke. "Hanging's a poor cure for honesty," he said. The guard sneered. "You've got a clever tongue, priest." Ranald blessed me with it, Yandolf replied smoothly. He also blessed me with potions. Here, one to steady your nerves. He handed the guard a small vial filled with pale blue liquid. The man drank it greedily, expecting spirits. A moment later, his knees gave out as the world tilted sideways. Yandolf caught him, eased him to the floor, and smiled at the onlookers. I call that the potion of humility, he said. The other guards lunged. Yandolf tossed a handful of powdered chalk into the air. It flared, blinding them long enough for him to cut the prisoner's bonds. Run, he hissed, Ranald smiling. By the time the guards stumbled to their feet, both men were gone. They found only the priest's coin left on the table, balanced on its edge. By the time Yandolf reached Middenheim, his name had spread again, this time as the Lucky Leech, a wandering priest who healed, tricked, and escaped justice by the skin of his teeth. Some called him a saint, others called him a criminal. Both were probably right. The Wolf City rose before him, carved into the mountain like a stone crown. Its banners fluttered under Ulrich's stern gaze. Yandolf smirked. A city of warriors and zealots. No better place for Ranald's laughter to hide. He crossed the gates under the alias Dr. Hahn, a travelling apothecary seeking work. The guards barely looked up. Inside, the streets were alive with soldiers, merchants, and nobles. Rich prey and poor souls both. He flipped his coin once more. Heads for mischief, he murmured. Tails for trouble. It landed on its edge again. Yandolf smiled. You never make it easy, do you? That night, in a crowded tavern called the Broken Boar, he sat nursing a mug when the door swung open. A woman entered, a head taller than most men, broad-shouldered, her hair braided tight, a sword at her hip that looked like it could fell a tree. The tavern quieted as she strode to the bar. The barkeep muttered something about Lady Isolde's guard. Yandolf raised an eyebrow. A noble's guard drinking with the rabble? There's luck in that. The woman turned her head. Her eyes met his, hard eyes, but alive, sharp with humour. You talk too much, she said. He grinned. Only when I see someone worth talking to. She laughed, a deep, honest sound. Then buy me a drink, priest. Yandolf did, and as the night stretched on, amid laughter and ale, he learned her name, Maria of Middenheim, and that she could outdrink any man alive. Ranald's coin turned warm against his chest, and Yandolf Hertler knew his luck had just taken a dangerous new turn. Morning came to Middenheim like a hammer strike. The sunlight cut through the smoke and frost, glinting off the mountain's stone walls. Merchants shouted, soldiers marched, and the Wolf City stirred to life under Ulrich's stern blessing. Yandolf Hertler, wandering priest, charlatan, and fool of fortune, sat on a tavern bench nursing a skull-splitting headache and a bruised ego. Maria had outdrunk him, twice. He stared at the empty mugs lined before him. You'd think a god of luck might spare me a hangover, he muttered. Ranald spares no fools, came the amused voice beside him. Maria stood in the doorway, armoured now, her sword strapped to her back. The morning light caught the edge of her blade, gleaming like dawn itself. She looked every inch the warrior, a mountain of muscle and confidence wrapped in leather and mail. And yet there was a gentleness in her eyes when she looked at him. Yandolf smiled through his pain. I see the goddess of ale walks the earth after all. She smirked. If I am, then you're my high priest. I'd rather keep my post, he said dryly. Ranald's kinder to his drunks. Maria laughed and tossed him an apple. Come, priest. You said you were a healer. My lady's caravan needs one. Lady Isolde von Herrscher was everything her name implied. Noble-born, proud, and about as self-aware as a peacock in silk. Her travelling company had stopped outside Middenheim's south gate, a small entourage of servants, guards and wagons laden with finery. She was bound for Talabecland on some political errand, and Maria was her sworn sword. Yandolf bowed deeply when introduced. Father Yandolf Hertler, servant of Ranald, god of luck, laughter, and occasionally medicine. Lady Isolde raised one immaculate brow. Ranald? I was not aware thieves had priests. Yandolf smiled pleasantly. Only the clever ones, my lady. Maria coughed to hide a laugh. Isolde's lips tightened, but she waved her gloved hand. Very well. Maria says you are skilled with herbs and tonics. See that my horses remain fit for the road, and you may earn a silver for your efforts. Generosity like that, Yandolf said, might make Ranald weep. She frowned, uncertain whether she'd been complimented or insulted. Yandolf took that as a victory. The journey south began under fair skies. Yandolf rode beside Maria's horse, his satchel of herbs bouncing against his hip. He spent his days tending beasts, mixing salves and muttering Rinaldian prayers that sounded suspiciously like jokes. The guards tolerated him. The servants adored him. Even Lady Isolde began to accept his presence, though she sniffed each potion before taking it. Maria, however, was another matter. She fascinated him. When she sparred, her sword moved like a dancer's limb, fluid, deadly, and beautiful. When she laughed, it was unrestrained, full of life. She had no time for vanity or subtlety, and yet beneath her bluntness lay a mind sharper than her blade. So, she said one evening as they camped beside a ruined shrine to Ta'al, you serve a god of thieves. Of luck, Yandolf corrected, though in the Empire the two are often confused. And what does your god want with a man like you? Yandolf smiled faintly, tossing a coin into the firelight. The same thing he wants from everyone, amusement. Maria snorted. Sounds like a dangerous god. Oh, he is, Yandolf said softly, but he's fairer than most. He caught her watching him then, not with suspicion but curiosity, and perhaps something more. 3 days later their luck turned. A band of roadmen ambushed the caravan as it crossed the Drakwold's edge. There were 6 of them, ragged, desperate, reeking of sweat and mud. The guards drew swords. Maria was already moving, bellowing orders. Steel clashed, hooves screamed, arrows hissed through the fog. Yandolf ducked behind a wagon, clutching his satchel. Ranald, if ever you meant to prove you exist, now would be grand. A blade flashed toward him. He stumbled back, fumbling for the nearest thing, an unmarked vial. He hurled it blindly. The bandit caught it full in the face. A puff of violet smoke exploded, coating him from head to toe. He blinked, swayed, then began giggling uncontrollably. What's happening? The man gasped between laughs. Experimental tincture, Yandolf said cheerfully. Side effects may include euphoria, dizziness, and death if you don't stop waving that knife. The man collapsed in hysterics. Yandolf looked around just in time to see Maria cleave through 2 more attackers. Her sword sang, her movements brutal and precise. She was magnificent and terrifying. When the last bandit fled into the trees, Maria turned, breathing hard. You all right, priest? Better than him, Yandolf said, nodding toward the laughing corpse. She gave him a strange look, half admiration, half exasperation. Ranald's luck indeed. That night they camped in uneasy silence. Lady Isolde ranted about the dangers of the road, the incompetence of her guards, and the lack of proper wine. Yandolf listened politely, offering her a flask of something soothing. She drank it. 10 minutes later she was snoring loud enough to scare wolves. Maria sat beside him by the fire, her sword across her knees. "You shouldn't toy with nobles," she said quietly. "They remember insults." "So does Ranald," Yandolf replied, "and he pays better." She smiled despite herself. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Both," he said. "It's the only way to stay alive." A long pause followed. The fire crackled. Then Maria asked, "Have you ever loved anyone, priest?" Yandolf blinked. "I've loved many things. Wine, coin, sleep." She punched his arm, gentle but firm. "You know what I mean." He hesitated, then sighed. "Once." But she preferred another man's god. Maria looked into the flames. "That's the trouble with gods. They always get in the way." Their eyes met. For a moment there was no Ranald, no Ulrich, no noble lady snoring in the background, only two souls balanced on the edge of something dangerous. "Maria," Yandolf said softly, "if I ever stop running, it might be for you." She smiled sadly. "Then don't stop. I'd hate to see you caught." By the time they reached Middenheim again, something unspoken had settled between them. A coin balanced on its edge, waiting to fall. Yandolf knew better than to force fate's hand, but Ranald, as always, enjoyed his jokes, because waiting at the gate, amid the banners of the Wolf City, was a troop of armoured riders bearing the crest of the Todbringer family. At their head rode a man Yandolf recognised from every tavern tale. Tall, proud, handsome, with the fierce eyes of a wolf and the arrogance of a noble born to command. Maria went pale. Yandolf followed her gaze. "Friend of yours?" She didn't answer. The noble dismounted, his gaze fixed on her. "Maria," he said, voice low and too intimate for formality. "You're back." Yandolf felt Ranald's coin grow warm against his chest again. "Oh," he murmured, smiling thinly, "this should be interesting." Middenheim loomed like a fortress of stone and smoke, its towers stabbing the sky. The smell of forge fire and wolf pelts filled the air. The Wolf City did not welcome strangers. It endured them. And yet Yandolf Hertler had never felt more curious about a place in his life. He watched as Maria dismounted, her hands trembling slightly despite her steady posture. The nobleman, Heinrich Todbringer, removed his riding gloves with practiced ease. Even his movements were aristocratic, each gesture precise and deliberate, like a man trained from birth to command respect. "Lady Isolde," Heinrich said politely, bowing over her hand. "Welcome back to Middenheim. My father sends his regards." Lady Isolde smiled in that way only nobles could, gracious yet hollow. "You honour us, my lord. I trust the city prospers." "As much as any city can under Ulrich's shadow," he replied. His eyes, however, never strayed far from Maria. Yandolf noticed. He noticed everything. Heinrich's gaze lingered a heartbeat too long, softened at the edges. Maria, for her part, stared straight ahead, jaw tight. She bowed curtly. "My lord," Heinrich's voice dropped, "I feared you'd left for good." Yandolf stepped forward before the silence could thicken. "Pardon the intrusion, my lord, but unless my eyes deceive me, your father's shadow reaches far indeed. Shall I fetch a lantern?" Heinrich blinked, startled. "And who might you be?" Yandolf bowed theatrically. "Father Yandolf Hertler, servant of Ranald, god of luck and thieves, though I assure you, I only steal hearts." Maria groaned quietly. Lady Isolde smothered a smile, but Heinrich's gaze sharpened. "A Ranaldian priest? In Middenheim? You must be very brave, or very foolish." Yandolf met his eyes evenly. "I'm both, my lord. That's why I'm still alive." Later that night, Yandolf and Maria lodged at an inn near the Wolf Gate, the same place where they had met weeks ago. The tavern was loud with song and drunken boasts. Maria sat in the corner, brooding over her mug. Yandolf joined her, nursing a cup of spiced wine. "So," he began casually, "you and the noble wolf pup, old friends?" Her eyes flicked up sharply. "Don't start." "Wouldn't dream of it," Yandolf said. "I merely observed that he looked at you like a man who'd misplaced something valuable." Maria sighed. "It's complicated." "Most things worth doing are," Yandolf said gently. She hesitated, then took a long drink before answering. "Before I served Lady Isolde, I guarded the Todbringer household. Heinrich was kind. More than that, he treated me as an equal, not a servant. We—" She stopped, jaw tightening. "We were foolish. He's a noble. I'm a soldier's daughter." Yandolf leaned back. "Ah, the old story. Love across the coin's edge." Maria glared. "It wasn't love. It was—" She stopped again, the words catching. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to him," Yandolf said softly, "and to you." She slammed her mug down. "You don't understand. He's promised to another, a noble alliance. I knew it then, I know it now, but my heart doesn't care for titles." For a long moment neither spoke. The firelight flickered between them. Finally Yandolf said, "Ranald has a saying, luck's just fate wearing a crooked grin. Maybe your fortune's not as cruel as you think." Maria gave a small, sad smile. "You believe that?" He shrugged. "I believe in Ranald, and he believes in making fools of us all." In the days that followed, Yandolf's reputation as a miracle healer spread through Middenheim's lower quarters. He treated beggars with herbs, eased soldiers' pain with laughter, and tricked nobles into paying double for holy blessings that smelled suspiciously of vinegar and gin. He never stayed long in one place. Ranald's priests were rarely welcome anywhere, but he left behind smiles where he could. Still, trouble brewed. Middenheim was a city of strict gods. Ulrich's fire and fury left little room for Ranald's laughter. The Temple of Ulrich called him a fraud. The Watch called him a nuisance, and more than once Yandolf caught the glint of armoured eyes watching from across the street. Maria warned him one night as they walked along the outer wall. "You're playing a dangerous game here, priest." "I play all my games dangerously," Yandolf said. "It's the only way to make them interesting." "I'm serious," she snapped. "Ulrich's priests don't tolerate heresy, and neither does Heinrich." Yandolf stopped. "Ah, so the wolf pup bites, does he?" She frowned. "He's not what you think." "Oh, I think he's everything I think," Yandolf said lightly. "And I think he's a man caught between duty and desire." Her hand tightened on her sword hilt. "Leave him out of this." "Gladly," Yandolf said, raising his hands, "if he'll do the same." The next evening, the city held a feast in the Todbringer Palace. Merchants, nobles, and priests gathered under banners of red and black. Lady Isolde attended, and Maria, as her bodyguard, followed close. Yandolf, never one to miss an opportunity, attended as well, disguised as a court physician. His borrowed robe still smelled faintly of its original owner. The great hall glittered with chandeliers and arrogance. Gold and laughter mingled like wine. Yandolf made small talk with the servants, slipping dice into pockets, dropping harmless powders into goblets, little gifts from Ranald to keep the mighty humble. He caught Maria's eye across the room. She was tense, standing near Heinrich, who looked equally troubled. When Heinrich excused himself from his father's side, Yandolf drifted after him, purely out of curiosity. He found the young noble alone on a balcony overlooking the wolf's path, staring into the mist. "Lovely evening," Yandolf said, stepping beside him. Heinrich turned sharply. "You again." "Ranald's priests turn up where luck leads," Yandolf said, and luck, it seems, has a fondness for your face." The nobleman's jaw clenched. "Stay away from Maria." Yandolf smiled thinly. "I might say the same to you. She deserves better than a liar and thief." "And she deserves better than a cage," Yandolf shot back. "You love her, I can see it, but your love would kill her." Heinrich's hand moved instinctively toward his sword. "You tread dangerously, priest." Yandolf didn't flinch. Danger's the only honest thing left in this city. The two men stared at one another, the tension thick as smoke. Then, without a word, Heinrich turned away. "If you truly care for her," he said, voice low, "protect her from what's coming." "What is coming?" Yandolf asked. Heinrich didn't answer. He walked back into the feast, leaving Yandolf alone on the balcony, the laughter of nobles echoing like distant thunder. When Yandolf returned to the inn that night, Maria was waiting. She looked pale, her eyes haunted. "What did he say to you?" she asked. "That you were in danger," Yandolf said quietly, "and that he still loves you." She looked away, tears catching in the firelight. "Then Ranald truly is a cruel god." Yandolf reached for his coin and flipped it. It landed on its edge once more. He sighed. "No, my dear, he's just got a wicked sense of humour." Middenheim's nobles had many vices: arrogance, vanity, and a taste for theatre chief among them. To a man like Yandolf Hertler, that made them irresistible prey. It began, as all Ranald's plans did, with a jest. A poster caught his eye one morning in the Wolf's Market, a grand notice printed in bold red ink, a performance for the glory of Ulrich, a new play, The Purity of the Wolf, to be attended by the esteemed Lord Heinrich Todbringer and the nobility of Middenheim. Yandolf grinned as he read. The play was to be staged in the great amphitheatre above the merchant quarter, an ostentatious display of faith and wealth. He could almost hear Ranald laughing already. He turned to Maria, who was sharpening her sword nearby. "Tell me, my dear, do nobles enjoy being laughed at?" She glanced up warily. "Not particularly." "Splendid," Yandolf said, "because I'm about to make them the funniest people in the Empire." He spent a week preparing. By day he played the harmless apothecary, tending to beggars and selling tonics that worked half the time. By night he brewed concoctions in the back of the broken boar, his candles burning low as he muttered to himself and flipped his coin for luck. The plan was delicate, audacious, and utterly mad. He purchased a few vials of vomit weed from a street alchemist, added a touch of powdered rosehip for aroma, and diluted it in sweetened wine. When consumed, it caused brief but spectacular sickness, the kind that left pride and carpets in ruins. Next, he sought the troupe of actors performing the play. They were a ragtag collection of dreamers and drunks who had more passion than talent. Yandolf approached them as Master Hahn the physician, offering his services for stage tonics to help calm nerves before the big performance. "Completely harmless," he assured them, smiling warmly. "I use it myself before every sermon." The troupe's director, a man with ink-stained fingers and despair in his eyes, nodded eagerly. "If it'll stop them fainting under the lights, I'll take 2 bottles." "Ranald bless you," Yandolf said, "and Ulrich too, if he's watching." The night of the play arrived cold and clear. Torches lined the streets leading up to the amphitheatre, casting orange light over the wolf banners fluttering overhead. Nobles in fur-lined cloaks gathered in glittering clusters, exchanging gossip and contempt in equal measure. Yandolf moved among them unseen, wearing a servant's tabard and carrying a tray of silver goblets filled with his special vintage. He saw Lady Isolde among the audience, her jewels bright as frost. Maria stood behind her, hand on her sword, ever watchful. Heinrich sat 2 rows away beside his father, Elector Count Boris Todbringer himself, and him a grim man with a voice like thunder and a temper to match. Yandolf bowed politely as he passed. Compliments of the players, my lords and ladies. A toast to Ulrich's glory. They drank. Ranald smiled. The play began with pomp and pretense. Actors in wolf pelts recited lines about purity and divine order. A chorus sang hymns to Ulrich, while servants fanned the audience with peacock feathers. Yandolf waited, hidden in the wings, watching the scene unfold. Then, halfway through the second act, the first noble coughed. A moment later, another clutched his stomach, then another. It spread through the stands like divine judgment. Nobles turned pale, their dignity dissolving faster than fine wine. The sound of retching and panic filled the air. Fans and lace kerchiefs fluttered helplessly. Lady Isolde shrieked as her gown was splattered by an unfortunate baron. Boris Todbringer rose, bellowing orders, while Heinrich covered his mouth in horror. Yandolf slipped into the shadows, whispering a quiet prayer. Ranald, old friend, you truly have a wicked sense of timing. The chaos was total. Servants fled. The actors froze mid-scene, unsure whether this was part of the performance. One of them muttered, It's a metaphor, I think." Yandolf nearly laughed aloud, but luck as always demanded payment. A sharp voice behind him, "You, stop!" He turned to find Heinrich, pale but furious, sword half drawn. "You," he snarled, "the priest, you did this." Yandolf raised his hands in mock innocence. "Me? I was merely offering refreshments." "Guards!" Heinrich shouted, and then Yandolf ran. He darted through backstage corridors, past terrified actors and overturned props. Shouts echoed behind him, armoured boots pounding stone. He leapt over a fallen curtain and burst out into the night, sprinting through the market square. The city blurred around him. Shouts, torches, laughter, chaos. He could hear Heinrich's voice behind him, closer now, determined. The man was fast for a noble. Too fast. Yandolf ducked into a narrow alley, vaulting over a fence and landing in a midden heap. He grimaced. "Ranald, your sense of humour is appalling." A sword flashed past his ear, slicing a lock of hair. Heinrich appeared, eyes blazing. "Enough games." Yandolf raised his hands. "Agreed. Shall we play dice instead?" Heinrich lunged. Yandolf sidestepped, catching the noble's cloak and twisting. The two stumbled together, crashing into a shuttered stall. The wood gave way. Heinrich cursed and swung again. Yandolf grabbed a bottle from the shelf and hurled it. The glass shattered, spraying vinegar into Heinrich's eyes. He roared, stumbling backward. "Sorry, my lord," Yandolf called. "My healing tonics are rather sharp." Heinrich swung blindly, and his boot slipped on the slick cobblestones. For an instant he hung in mid-air, arms flailing. Then, with a shout, he tumbled backward through the open window of the tannery behind him. There was a loud splash. Yandolf winced. Ah, nothing like a nobleman's dignity to break a fall. He glanced up at the moonlit rooftops. "Ranald?" he murmured. "If you're watching, that was for you." Then he vanished into the night. By dawn, the story had spread across Middenheim. The nobles of the Wolf City had been blessed with the most humiliating sickness in living memory. The play's title had already changed in the taverns, from the purity of the wolf to the purgation of the wolf. Some said it was the work of chaos. Others whispered of Ranald's laughter echoing in the rafters. Yandolf listened to every tale from the safety of the sewers, smiling faintly. His name was already cursed in noble halls, but adored in the gutters. Maria found him there that evening, torchlight dancing off her armour. "You've gone too far this time," she said. though there was amusement in her eyes. Far? Yandolf said innocently. I'd call it poetic distance. She shook her head, torn between fury and affection. Heinrich fell into a vat of dye, his hairs blue. Yandolf grinned. Ranald works in mysterious hues. Maria stared at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing. You're impossible. Only statistically, Yandolf replied, flipping his coin. It landed, as always, on its edge. He caught it and slipped it back into his pocket. Come, my dear, let's disappear before the nobles remember how to aim. The sewers of Middenheim were not meant for men. They were a maze of stone and filth carved deep into the mountain rock, tunnels where even light seemed reluctant to go. Yet Yandolf Hertler, priest of Ranald, had found himself there often enough to call them home. He had spent 3 weeks hiding below the city since the incident at the theatre. Above, bounty posters showed a crude sketch of his face, nose too long, chin too small. He kept one pinned to his wall for amusement. Maria, he said one evening as she entered their makeshift den, I've never looked better. They've given me cheekbones. She rolled her eyes. They've also put a price on your head, 500 crowns dead or alive. Yandolf bowed. Finally, my worth is quantified. But Maria wasn't smiling. Her hand rested on her sword. You've made powerful enemies. Heinrich can't protect you anymore. Not after that stunt. Yandolf sighed. The man needed humbling. He nearly broke his neck and learned the virtue of balance. Ranald's lesson, not mine. Maria looked ready to argue further when a sound interrupted her. Faint, skittering like claws on stone. She turned sharply, hand on hilt. Rats, she muttered. Big ones, Yandolf said. Or ambitious. The noise grew louder, a soft chittering, then silence. Yandolf frowned. He'd heard rats before, but never like that. There was rhythm to the sound, a pattern, almost words. He raised his lantern. The flame guttered. Shadows danced along the walls, long, thin, wrong. Maria's jaw tightened. We should go. Curiosity is the thief's curse, Yandolf murmured, stepping forward. They followed the sound through a narrow passage, the air thick with damp and rot. The tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber, ancient, its walls carved with runes long forgotten. Pools of stagnant water reflected the flicker of their lantern, and there at the far end moved shapes. Not rats, not men. Their bodies were hunched and twisted, covered in mottled fur. Yellow eyes gleamed in the dark. The creatures carried rusted blades and crude muskets, their tails twitching like whips. Yandolf froze, his breath caught. By Ranald's crooked grin, Maria whispered, Sigmar preserve us. One of the creatures turned, sniffing the air. It barked something guttural and sharp, words in a tongue Yandolf didn't recognize, but their meaning was clear. They had been seen. Maria drew her sword. Run! For once, Yandolf didn't argue. They sprinted through the tunnels, the chittering echoing behind them, claws scraping stone. Yandolf's lantern swung wildly, throwing mad shadows on the walls. A shot cracked, a flash of green light, and a stone beside him exploded into shards. They're shooting, he gasped. Keep moving, Maria shouted. Left tunnel. They rounded a bend and burst into a drainage shaft. Water rushed below, black and cold. A narrow bridge crossed the torrent, slick with moss. Maria went first, blade ready. Yandolf followed, slipping once, catching himself on the rail. Behind them came the skittering horde. Halfway across, Yandolf drew a flask from his belt, a potion of his own making. He hurled it at the approaching figures. It burst in a cloud of choking purple smoke. The first few creatures shrieked, clawing at their eyes. Ranald's luck, deliver us! Yandolf shouted, sprinting after Maria. They reached the far side and slammed a rusted gate shut behind them. Yandolf jammed a metal rod through the latch. The creatures slammed against it moments later, screeching and clawing, but the gate held. For now. Maria bent over, gasping for breath. What? What were those things? Yandolf stared back through the bars, heart pounding. Not rats, not men. Something worse. They escaped to the surface through a forgotten storm drain, emerging into the chill of night. Middenheim sprawled above them, peaceful and ignorant. The stars gleamed overhead, uncaring. Yandolf leaned against a wall, shivering despite himself. I've seen all manner of filth in my time, he muttered. But that was something from the gods' nightmares. Maria nodded grimly. We should tell someone. Who? Yandolf scoffed. The Ulrican priests? They'll say I'm drunk. The Watch? They'll arrest me before I finish the story. There must be someone, she insisted. Heinrich. Yandolf stiffened. No, he'd think it's another of my tricks. Maria met his gaze. You said you serve Ranald, then use that luck of yours. Find a way. Yandolf looked down at the coin in his palm. For the first time in years, he felt no urge to flip it. Ranald's silence was louder than laughter. In the following days, Yandolf tried everything. He visited taverns, whispered to beggars, bribed guards, but no one believed him. Ratmen beneath Middenheim, it was madness, a drunk's tale, a jest too far. Even the gamblers at the Rinaldian den laughed at him. Careful, priest, one said. You've been breathing too much sewer air. But Yandolf had seen them. The gleam of their eyes haunted his dreams. The hiss of their speech echoed in his mind. He found Maria one night sharpening her blade by candlelight. They're real, he said simply, and they know I know. She looked up frowning. What do you mean? They've been following me. I hear them at night, scratching beneath the floorboards. She stood. Then we leave. Now. Yandolf hesitated. If we run, they win. If I can get Boris Todbringer himself to see the truth, you'll die trying. Maybe, but better that than waiting in the dark. Maria stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. Ranald's luck, Yandolf. You'll need it. He smiled faintly. He owes me a few favours. That night, as he prepared to confront the impossible, Yandolf felt something he hadn't in years. Fear. Not of death, but of silence. Ranald's coin had always answered him, always landed on its edge. Now, when he flipped it, it fell flat. He picked it up slowly, staring at its dull face. Come on, old friend, he whispered. Don't leave me now. No answer came. Outside, in the distance, something howled. Not wolf, not man. And beneath the city, 1,000 yellow eyes blinked awake. Middenheim was not a city easily shaken. It had survived orcs, chaos, famine, and fire. Its people were as hard as the stone it stood on. But Yandolf Hertler had learned that stubbornness and stupidity often walked hand in hand, especially among the powerful. For 3 days he tried to warn them. He visited every temple, every tavern, every guild hall. He told of what he'd seen in the sewers. The rat men with their glowing weapons, their whispering tongues, their hunger for the city above. And for 3 days no one believed him. At the temple of Ulrich, a priest spat at his feet. At least have the decency to lie about something holy, the man snarled. Rat men. Next you'll tell us Morslieb itself whispers your name. At the garrison, the watch captain laughed in his face. Rats with swords, eh? Perhaps they'll join the Emperor's army next. Be gone before I throw you in the stocks, trickster. Even the Ronaldian gamblers turned him away, muttering that the god of luck had finally abandoned his priest. By the fourth day, Yandolf's coin hadn't landed on its edge once. He sat alone that night in a deserted shrine to Ranald, hidden behind a tavern kitchen. A small wooden mask of the laughing god hung crookedly on the wall. Cobwebs clung to its grin. Yandolf knelt before it, head bowed. "You always said luck's a wheel," he murmured. "Well, mine's stuck in the mud, old friend." He took out his coin, tarnished, scratched, ordinary, and set it on the altar. "Just a sign," he whispered. "One toss. Heads, I try again. Tails, I give it up." He flipped it. The coin spun, flashed once in the candlelight, then clattered to the floor. Tails. He stared at it for a long moment, jaw tight. So that's it then. He turned to leave and stopped. The mask on the wall had shifted. Its grin seemed wider now. Or perhaps that was the flicker of the flame. Either way, Yandolf felt something stir behind him, a breath of laughter, faint but real. He looked down at the coin again. It now rested, impossibly, on its edge. Yandolf smiled. "You bastard. I knew you weren't done with me." The next morning he went to the palace. It took all of Ranald's cunning to get past the guards. A borrowed uniform, a false letter of summons, a handful of silver donations. By noon, he stood in the audience hall of Boris Todbringer himself. The Elector Count sat upon his wolf-carved throne, his great grey beard bristling, his scarred face cold as winter. Beside him stood Heinrich, eyes wary, and Maria, now in a guard's uniform, hand on her sword. Yandolf bowed low. "Your Excellency, I bring grave news." Boris's voice rumbled like a landslide. "You again, the jester priest. I should have you flogged for that theatre farce." Yandolf smiled thinly. "By all means, my lord, but perhaps hear the joke first. It may save your city." Heinrich stepped forward. "Father, he's dangerous." "Only to the complacent," Yandolf said. "Listen to me. There are creatures beneath Middenheim, rat men. They breed in the dark, plotting to bring down the city from below. I've seen them." Boris snorted. "Ratmen, bedtime tales for children." "I thought so too," Yandolf said quietly, "until they started shooting warp fire at my head." The hall erupted in laughter from courtiers and guards alike. Even Heinrich allowed himself a bitter smile. But Maria didn't laugh. Her eyes stayed locked on Yandolf's, searching, uncertain. Boris slammed a fist on his armrest. "Enough. I'll not waste time on fools and heretics." Yandolf met his gaze steadily. "Would you rather waste your city?" That did it. The guards advanced. Heinrich gave the order to seize him. Yandolf didn't resist as they grabbed his arms, only chuckled softly. "When the floor collapses under your feet, remember who warned you." They dragged him out into the courtyard, threw him into the gutter, and slammed the gate shut. For a long moment Yandolf lay there, staring up at the grey sky. Rain began to fall, cold and mocking. He laughed until he coughed. "Luck's last laugh," he muttered. "How fitting." That night he made his choice. If the nobles would not believe words, they would believe spectacle. Ranald had taught him well. Lies and laughter often serve truth better than sermons. He snuck back into the sewers, lantern in hand, following the same tunnels as before. The smell of corruption was stronger now. He found claw marks on the stone, strange glyphs painted in green slime, and there, in the darkness, he heard chanting. He crept closer, peering into a vast chamber lit by sickly green crystals. Hundreds of ratmen swarmed below, their bodies writhing like shadows. At the centre stood a creature taller than the rest, robed in filth and fur, holding a crooked staff that sparked with unnatural light. Yandolf's stomach turned. "Sweet Ranald," he breathed. "They're real?" Then he smiled faintly. "And they're about to become famous." He returned to the surface with his proof. Not gold or parchment, but a plan. He spent the next 2 days whispering in taverns, bribing watchmen, and feeding gossip to those who thrived on scandal. Soon the rumour spread. The priest of Ranald plans to expose the true evil beneath Middenheim. The story reached the palace within hours. Boris Todbringer ignored it at first, until one of his engineers reported tremors in the lower vaults, strange noises in the night. He ordered an inspection, reluctantly. Yandolf met them at the gate. Heinrich, Maria, a handful of soldiers, and 2 torchbearers. "Well," Yandolf said cheerfully, "shall we take a stroll beneath your fine city?" Heinrich scowled. "If this is another of your tricks—" "Then you'll have every right to hang me," Yandolf said. "But if it's not—" They descended. The tunnels seemed quieter this time. Too quiet. Their torches burned low, casting thin light against the wet walls. The air was thick, heavy with rot. "Nothing here," one guard muttered. "Just sewage." Yandolf opened his mouth to reply, and the wall exploded. From the breach poured a swarm of fur and fangs, eyes glowing green, shrieking in unholy chorus. The guards fell back in panic as the creatures rushed forward, blades glinting. "Sigmar's blood!" Heinrich shouted, drawing his sword. Yandolf stood frozen for half a second, awe and horror mixing in his chest. "Told you," he whispered. Maria dragged him backward. "Move!" The Skaven surged like a tide. Heinrich and the guards held the line, steel clashing against chittering claws. For every rat that fell, 2 more emerged from the dark. Yandolf grabbed a torch, flung it into a leaking pipe. Flame erupted, sealing the passage in a burst of fire. The explosion rocked the tunnel. Silence followed, broken only by the drip of water and the ragged breaths of survivors. When the smoke cleared, Heinrich stared at Yandolf, face pale. "You were right." Yandolf grinned weakly. "I usually am." By dawn, the whole city knew. Boris Todbringer himself ordered the tunnels sealed and the alarm raised. The Skaven were driven back, not destroyed, but scattered. The threat could no longer be denied, and in the midst of it all, as the bells of Middenheim rang and the fires burned below, Yandolf stood atop the city walls beside Maria. His clothes were torn, his face blackened with soot, but his eyes gleamed. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "We did. You, me, and a little luck." Maria smiled faintly. "Ranald's watching over you, Yandolf." He looked out over the city, where the smoke curled like laughter into the morning sky. "Maybe," he said, "but I think he's laughing at me." The bells of Middenheim rang for 3 days, not in mourning, nor quite in celebration, but something between. The city had been shaken to its foundations. The Skaven, once dismissed as drunken tales, had risen from myth to nightmare, and the man who had warned them, the beggar, the liar, the trickster priest, was now hailed as both saviour and heretic. Yandolf Hertler found the irony delicious. He wandered the market square on the morning after the purge. The air was thick with smoke and gratitude. Soldiers marched, priests blessed, and merchants shouted of rat-proof charms for sale. Children whispered his name in awe, tossing coins to beggars and shouting, "Ranald's priest, Ranald's luck." Even the watch looked at him differently now, though whether with respect or suspicion he couldn't tell. "Strange, isn't it?" said Maria, walking beside him. "You finally tell the truth, and everyone assumes you are lying until the city starts to burn." That's faith for you, Yandolf said. The gods give us eyes, and we close them out of courtesy. She smiled faintly. You could stay, you know. They might even forgive your earlier crimes. Crimes? Yandolf feigned innocence. You wound me. I mean it, she said. You've proven yourself. Boris himself asked for your name. That's exactly why I'm leaving. Maria stopped. Leaving? He turned to her, his coin spinning lazily between his fingers. Ranald doesn't let his priests rest long. Luck's a road, not a home. If I stay, it'll turn on me sooner or later. You've said that before, she said quietly. Every time you're close to happiness, you run. He paused, lowering the coin. And every time I don't run, happiness does. They found themselves later that day in the gardens of the Todbringer estate, a rare patch of green amid the grey stone of Middenheim. Lady Isolde had departed for Talabheim, leaving Maria free from service for the first time in years. Heinrich Todbringer awaited them there, arm in a sling, his hair still faintly blue from the dye vat. Priest, Heinrich said with a wry grimace, you have a talent for survival. Ranald's blessing, Yandolf said, and the occasional misdirection. Heinrich approached Maria, his expression softening. You saved my life down there. Maria lowered her gaze. It was my duty. No, Heinrich said firmly, it was more than that. Yandolf cleared his throat. I can step outside if this is about to become sentimental. Stay, Heinrich said, eyes never leaving Maria. You deserve to hear this too, trickster. Without you, Middenheim would be ashes. Yandolf gave a small bow. I prefer my accolades unspoken, but I'll make an exception. Heinrich smiled faintly. Then he turned back to Maria. Father has offered me command of the city watch. I could use a captain I trust. Maria blinked. You mean... He nodded. You've earned it. For a moment she said nothing. Then she smiled. A rare, honest smile that reached her eyes. Thank you, Heinrich. Yandolf watched them, the air between them thick with unspoken words. He knew that look. He'd seen it before, in another time, another life. It was the look of two souls chained by duty but bound by something stronger. He flipped his coin once more. It landed on its edge. Well, he said softly, seems Ranald's decided the joke's on me. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the towers, Yandolf packed his few belongings, a flask, a pouch of herbs, a deck of cards, and a single silver coin. Maria entered quietly, arms crossed. So that's it, she said. You're really going. He smiled without looking up. The road's calling. She stepped closer. You could stay, here, with me. He turned, and for once he had no quip ready. The torchlight caught her face, strong, scarred, and beautiful in its defiance. He wanted to tell her that he would, that Ranald himself could curse him, and he'd still stay. But the god of trickery had already whispered the punchline. You love him, Yandolf said quietly. Maria froze. What? Heinrich, he said simply. You always have. She opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. How long have you known? Since the first time you spoke his name like it hurt, Yandolf said. You're not the first to hide from love, Maria. Just the bravest. She stepped forward, eyes glistening. And you? What do you hide from? He smiled sadly. Everything else. They stood in silence for a long while. Finally, she said, He can't love me, not truly, not with his bloodline, his duties. Then he'll learn, Yandolf interrupted. Or he won't. Either way, you deserve to find out. She stared at him, searching his face. And you? He took her hand, kissed it gently. I've already had more luck than I deserve. Her lips trembled. You're a fool. I'm Ranald's fool, he said. There's a difference. He stepped back, adjusting his coat. Tell Heinrich the city's his to save now. Tell Ranald I'll try not to embarrass him further. Yandolf. He turned to the doorway, silhouetted by the dying light. If you ever hear laughter on the wind, don't look for me. Just toss a coin and see how it lands. She laughed softly through her tears. It'll land on its edge, won't it? He smiled. If you're lucky. He left Middenheim before dawn. The city still smoked in the distance, its towers catching the first gold of morning. Yandolf paused on the road, looking back once, at the place where he'd found love, faith, and the laughter of a god. Ranald, he murmured, keep her safe, and if you must play your tricks, play them gently. He flipped his coin. It spun high, flashing silver in the sun, and vanished, snatched away by the wind. Yandolf laughed softly. Of course. Then he walked on, his shadow stretching long behind him, the road ahead winding like fate itself. The road from Middenheim was old and cruel. It wound through forests that whispered of older gods, through hills where bones of battles long past still jutted from the earth like teeth. Yandolf Hertler walked it alone, his boots worn, his cloak patched, his coin pouch lighter than his conscience. But his heart, that strange, stubborn heart, was freer than it had been in years. He hummed as he walked, a half-remembered tune from his begging days. Somewhere behind him, the great city of the White Wolf shrank into mist. Ahead lay the Empire, vast, corrupt, and full of opportunities to make fools of fools. Ranald's kind of country. By the time he reached the outskirts of Talabecland, Yandolf had become several men. To a pair of road wardens, he was Dr. Hauer, an apothecary travelling to sell miracle tonics. To a lonely innkeeper's wife, he was Brother Yannick, humble priest of Ranald. To a band of mercenaries on the march, he was Old Hurt, jester and dice master. And to himself, when the campfire burned low and the lies fell silent, he was no one at all. He often thought of Maria in those quiet hours, of her laugh, her strength, the way she'd scolded him like a misbehaving child. He imagined her standing beside Heinrich in Middenheim, sword in hand, the two of them bickering even as they protected the city together. It made him smile and ache. Ranald, he muttered one night, flicking his coin into the firelight. If that's your idea of a joke, I'll admit it's a fine one, but you might have left me a punchline. The coin landed on its edge again, gleaming upright in the dirt. Yandolf groaned. You're impossible. Weeks passed in the usual chaos. In Altdorf, he sold anti-plague elixirs to nobles too drunk to ask what was in them, mostly vinegar, garlic, and optimism. In Talabheim, he ran a rigged dice game in a temple courtyard and donated half the winnings to orphans, keeping the other half naturally as Ranald would have wanted. He narrowly escaped a witch hunter by faking madness and reciting psalms backward until the man fled in disgust. Luck favoured him, though never kindly. It was Ranald's way, to give with one hand and slap with the other. One rainy night, Yandolf took shelter in a crumbling roadside chapel. Its altar was dedicated to Ta'al, but someone had scratched a laughing face into the wood beside it. Ranald's sigil, small and sly. He smiled and knelt. Even here, eh? You get around. The chapel door creaked open behind him. A figure entered, a woman, cloaked and hooded, limping slightly. Late for prayer, Yandolf said, not looking up. Or early for confession? Depends who's listening, she said. Her voice was sharp but tired. You're the Ranaldian, aren't you? The one from Middenheim. He froze. Slowly he turned. You've heard of me. Everyone's heard of you, she said, lowering her hood. Her face was pale, scarred across the cheek. You made nobles sick in their seats and exposed monsters in their holes. You're a legend in the gutters. I prefer rumour myself, Yandolf said. Legends tend to end badly. She laughed softly, a bitter sound. Name's Lies. Used to be a thief in Nuln. Now I run messages for those who still worship the laughing god. Yandolf raised an eyebrow. Still? You make it sound like treason. In some places it is, she said. Sigmarites call us liars and blasphemers. Ulricans call us cowards. But you gave the Rinaldian name back its teeth. He felt a warmth stir in his chest. Pride, perhaps, or something dangerously close. Well, he said, I do like to make a scene. Lies stepped closer. Come with me. There's a den outside Talabheim, a real temple hidden under a tavern. Cards, dice, priests, the lot. They'd welcome you, Yandolf Hertler, maybe even make you a bishop. He chuckled. A bishop of thieves. Ranald would choke on his wine. She smiled. Then you'll fit right in. They travelled together for several days, following the river east. Lies was clever, sharper than most thieves Yandolf had met. She could slip a purse, forge a seal, and talk her way past an inquisitor without blinking. They shared food, stories, and laughter. Real laughter, not the hollow kind that followed most of Yandolf's lies. One night, as they camped beneath an old oak, she asked, Do you ever tire of running? Yandolf stared into the fire. Running keeps me alive. But doesn't it get lonely? He thought of Maria again, and the coin that had vanished into the wind. Only when I stop. Lies studied him, then smiled sadly. Ranald's curse, then. What do you mean? He blesses his favourites with luck, she said, but he never lets them rest. The moment they settle, fortune turns sour. Yandolf nodded slowly. A cruel kind of love. The only kind the gods know, she said. They reached the Rinaldian den at dawn. It was hidden beneath a sagging tavern called the Crooked Moon. Inside, the smell of wine and sweat masked the whispers of gamblers and thieves. But below, through a trapdoor and a narrow stair, lay a chamber lit by candles and laughter. Ranald's symbols adorned the walls, playing cards, silver keys, masks of smiling wood. A dozen worshippers sat around tables, rolling dice, praying between hands. At the far end, an old priest in a crimson waistcoat rose to greet them. His smile was as sharp as a knife. Well, well, the famous Yandolf Hertler, Middenheim's mad priest. I prefer a lucky, Yandolf said, bowing slightly. The priest chuckled. Ranald's hand is upon you, no doubt. Come, join us. The table's always open for those who deal in laughter. Liesa nudged him. Told you they'd welcome you. Yandolf hesitated. Then he smiled and stepped forward. For the first time in months he felt something like peace. Not safety. Ranald's servants never had that, but belonging. He took his place at the table, rolled the dice, and whispered a small prayer under his breath. Laugh with me, old friend. Just this once. The dice tumbled, clattered, and landed. Snake eyes. The room erupted in laughter. Yandolf joined in, shaking his head. Ah, Ranald, you never could resist the punchline. That night, as he drifted to sleep among thieves and gamblers, Yandolf dreamed of a coin spinning endlessly through the air, never landing, never falling. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, Ranald laughed. The den beneath the Crooked Moon was more than a gambling hall. It was a cathedral of laughter and lies, and every chuckle was a prayer. Dice clattered like beads on an altar. Coins flashed like candlelight. To outsiders, it was sin. To those within, it was worship. Yandolf Hertler found himself at home. He spent his days mixing potions for gamblers seeking an edge, and his nights dealing cards to men who prayed with their purses. Luck, as always, danced on his shoulder. Never loyal, but never gone. In time, the Ronaldian faithful began to whisper. The priest of Middenheim walks among us. The god's trickster come to test our fortunes. Yandolf didn't deny it. He let the story grow, because stories, like luck, thrived on belief. One evening, the old priest who ran the den summoned him to the back chamber. The man's name was Father Calvin, though few dared call him that. His eyes gleamed like coins, and his grin had too many teeth for comfort. A half-empty bottle of Estalian brandy rested at his elbow. "Sit," Calvin said, waving a ringed hand. "You've been busy, Yandolf Hertler. The people speak your name with more reverence than Ranald's." Yandolf took a seat, feigning humility. "I'd hardly say that, Father. Ranald's the one tossing my dice." Calvin chuckled. "Ah, modesty, the rarest lie of all." He poured 2 glasses. "You've done more for the faith than most of our priests in Altdorf. But tell me, what you want?" Yandolf frowned. "Want?" "Yes." Calvin leaned forward. "Every gambler has a stake. Every liar has a truth he hides. What's yours?" Yandolf hesitated. He could have said gold, fame, safety, all the easy lies. But instead he said softly, "To know when the joke ends." Calvin's grin widened. "Ah, a philosopher. Dangerous breed, those, especially in Ranald's flock." He lifted his glass in toast. "Then let's see if the god answers your question." That night the den hosted the Rite of Masks, a Ronaldian ceremony held once a year. Every worshipper wore a different face, painted smiles, carved visages, or simple cloth veils. They called it the Feast of Fortune, where truth and lies traded places, and even the gods looked away for an evening. Yandolf donned a mask of his own, a plain white face with a crooked grin. As he entered the hall, a cheer rose from the crowd. "To the priest of tricks!" someone shouted. "To Ranald's chosen!" The music struck up, wild and fast. Cards flew, dice rolled, coins changed hands. It was chaos made holy. The Ronaldian creed lived here in every breath. Take from the rich, aid the poor, and never forget to laugh. But amidst the revelry, Yandolf noticed something strange. Several masked figures sat apart, unmoving, their eyes fixed on him. Their masks were all the same, black, expressionless, like empty sockets staring through the noise. Calvin appeared beside him, brandy in hand. "Our guests from Nuln," he murmured, "high brothers of the hidden hand. They oversee Ranald's interests in the south." Yandolf's instincts prickled. "They don't seem festive." "They seldom are," Calvin said. "They deal in subtler games, influence, extortion, politics. They say Ranald's luck is wasted on the poor." "Then they're worshipping the wrong god," Yandolf muttered. Calvin laughed softly. "Careful, Hertler. Faith is a game played with knives." As the night wore on, the games grew riskier. One by one, gamblers challenged Yandolf to test his luck, and one by one, they lost. His dice rolled perfect, his cards never missed, his smile never faltered. When the final challenger fell silent, Yandolf stood with a small pile of winnings before him. Gold, jewels, and trinkets of every kind. But it wasn't the wealth that silenced the hall. It was what happened next. The black-masked brothers rose as one. "Ranald's hand favours you," said the tallest among them. His voice was smooth as oil. "Perhaps too much." Yandolf spread his arms. "If the god smiles on me, who am I to refuse him?" "Or perhaps," the man said, "you've learned to cheat the god himself." The crowd murmured, half in awe, half in fear. Yandolf chuckled lightly. If I'd done that, my luck would have run dry years ago. The brother stepped closer. Faith is not a game, Hertler. Of course it is, Yandolf said. That's why Ranald wins. Kelvin interjected smoothly. Brothers, surely there's no need. But the leader raised a hand. Let him prove it. One throw, one roll of the dice. If Ranald favours him still, we'll name him High Priest of the North. If not, he let the silence hang. Yandolf's grin faded slightly. And if not, then Ranald's laughter ends. A hush fell. Someone handed Yandolf a pair of dice, carved bone, worn smooth. He felt their weight in his palm. They were ordinary, but he'd learned long ago that ordinary things held the greatest magic. He closed his eyes. All right, old friend, he whispered to Ranald. Let's see if you're still listening. He rolled. The dice tumbled, bounced, and froze mid-roll. Literally froze, suspended an inch above the table, glowing faintly with golden light. Gasps filled the room. Then they landed, double sixes. The hall erupted in cheers. Kelvin laughed until tears ran down his face. Even the black-masked brothers hesitated, glancing at each other uncertainly. Yandolf just stared at the dice. He felt the faintest brush of laughter in the air, warm and familiar. Not mocking this time, but proud. Well, he murmured, looks like the god's still in the game. After the ceremony, Kelvin found him sitting alone at the altar. You realize what this means? That I can't lose at dice anymore, Yandolf said. That Ranald's chosen you, Kelvin replied. You're no longer just a priest, Yandolf. You're a symbol, the laughing god's living jest. Yandolf looked up. Symbols make for easy targets. Kelvin smiled thinly. Then perhaps it's time you learn to hide behind more than a mask. That night, Yandolf didn't sleep. He sat awake, the laughter of the den fading behind him, staring at the dice that glowed faintly in his hand. He wondered if Ranald's gift was blessing or curse, or simply another trick to keep him moving. He remembered Maria's face, Heinrich's wounded pride, the Skaven's red eyes in the dark. So many lives left behind, so many lies worn thin. Ranald, he said softly, you've made me your fool. Just tell me how the story ends. The only answer was a whisper of laughter, distant but fond. Yandolf smiled to himself. Thought so? He pocketed the dice, rose, and stepped into the dawn. A priest, a liar, and perhaps for the first time a legend. The next months were good ones, almost too good. Under Yandolf's guidance, the crooked moon became more than a den. It was a sanctuary. Thieves tithed in silver, gamblers prayed before each hand, and beggars found bread and warmth beneath its roof. The Ronaldian faith spread like whispered laughter through Talabek land. Merchants who cheated their workers woke to find their ledgers rewritten. Noble carriages lost their wheels at the worst possible moments. Coin purses grew lighter in the mansions and heavier in the slums. Every misfortune left behind a single symbol, a coin balanced on its edge. And every time Yandolf heard the stories, he smiled. Ranald's working overtime, he would say. But inside, a quiet unease had begun to grow, because luck like that never came free. It started with the dice. They no longer glowed, but they rolled too well. Every game Yandolf played ended the same way. Double sixes, perfect hands, impossible streaks. Even when he tried to lose, fortune refused him. Ranald's favour, Father Kelvin said. Enjoy it. But Yandolf couldn't. He'd been a trickster too long not to smell a rigged game. One night, as the den emptied, he sat alone with his dice on the table. The candles burned low, shadows curling like smoke. He rolled once. double sixes, again, double sixes, a third time, the same. "Stop it," he muttered. "You're making me look bad." A whisper answered from the dark. "Bad luck never looks bad to those who profit from it." Yandolf froze. The air felt suddenly thick. "Ranald?" A soft chuckle echoed, everywhere and nowhere. "Play the game, Yandolf. That's all I ever asked." "And when does it end?" he whispered. "When you stop laughing." The voice faded, leaving only silence. Yandolf sat there for a long time, staring at the dice. Then he picked them up, placed them in a pouch, and whispered, "Then I'll laugh louder." But the faithful weren't all laughing. The black-masked brothers from Nuln had lingered, whispering among themselves. They'd seen the miracles, yes, but they'd also seen the growing power of Yandolf Hertler, the beggar-turned-priest-turned-symbol. And symbols were dangerous. Kelvin warned him first. "They don't like you, lad. Never trust a man who hides his smile." Yandolf grinned. "That's half my acquaintances." "I'm serious," Kelvin said. "They think you're playing both sides, using Ranald's name to build your own kingdom." "Ridiculous," Yandolf said lightly. "I'm far too lazy for that." But when he laughed, it sounded thin. The attempt came 3 nights later. He'd been walking home through the alleys of Talabheim, the moon bright and cruel above. His boots clicked on cobblestones slick with rain. He was halfway to the den when he heard it, the shuffle of too many feet behind him. He turned the corner and found 3 men blocking the way ahead, masks of black cloth hiding their faces. More footsteps came from behind. "Gentlemen," Yandolf said, raising his hands, "if this is about unpaid winnings, I assure you, Ranald himself vouches for me." The largest stepped forward, drawing a knife. "The God can't save cheats." Yandolf sighed. "He's saved worse." Then they lunged. He dodged the first slash, ducked the second, and threw a handful of powdered herb from his sleeve. Flash powder, bright and blinding. The alley filled with white smoke and curses. Yandolf rolled aside, grabbed a barrel, and sent it crashing into one attacker's legs. He could have run. He should have. But the third man's blade caught his coat, tearing the fabric, and with it his patience. "Ranald, forgive me," he muttered, drawing a small vial from his belt. He smashed it underfoot, a potion of slick oil he'd brewed for tavern floors. The cobblestones turned to glass. The masked men slipped, stumbled, and crashed to the ground in a tangle. By the time they recovered, Yandolf was gone, his laughter echoing down the alley. He found Kelvin waiting in his chamber when he returned. The old priest's expression was grim. "They tried to gut you, didn't they?" "Twice, if you count their cooking," Yandolf said. "What do they want?" Kelvin's answer was a single word: obedience. He poured a glass of wine and handed it to Yandolf. "You've become too visible. The High Brothers prefer shadows. You draw attention, you make waves. They'll drown you to keep the surface calm." Yandolf took the glass, staring into the red liquid. "So what do we do?" "We?" Kelvin chuckled. "No, lad, you." Yandolf looked up sharply. "You're with them?" "I'm with Ranald," Kelvin said softly. "And so should you be. Leave the politics, the fame. Get out before your luck turns." Yandolf studied him. "You sound like a man who's already seen the dice roll." Kelvin's smile was tired. "I've seen too many rolls to believe in winning streaks." That night, Yandolf packed his few belongings. Again. The den was quiet, the laughter gone, the tables empty. He walked among them, touching each one like a farewell. Ranald's sigil gleamed faintly in the candlelight above the altar. He flipped a coin, watching it spin. "If you land on your edge," he whispered, "I'll go." The coin landed flat, then slowly, impossibly, it tilted and balanced. Yandolf laughed softly, sadly. You really don't let me rest, do you? He turned and froze. Kelvin stood in the doorway, a knife in his hand. His smile was gone. I told them I'd deal with you quietly. Yandolf's grin faded. Kelvin, why? Because you're too good, lad, the old priest said, voice shaking. Too lucky. Ranald's laughter needs balance. For every jest, a tragedy. The knife trembled in his grip. His eyes were wet. I'm sorry. Yandolf took a slow step forward. You don't have to. Kelvin lunged. The blade flashed and missed. Yandolf twisted, the motion pure instinct. The knife drove into the wooden post beside him. For a heartbeat they stared at each other. Old priest and new, faith clashing with fear. Then Kelvin gasped. The handle had snapped and the broken blade jutted from his chest. He looked down, eyes wide with disbelief. Ranald, forgive, he managed before he fell. Yandolf caught him, lowering him to the floor. You fool, he whispered. You played fair. Kelvin's blood soaked into the boards, dark and silent. When dawn came, Yandolf left Talabheim. No one saw him go. He carried only his pack, his dice, and a fresh scar on his soul. Behind him, the crooked moon burned, a message, or perhaps a blessing. Above it, smoke curled into the shape of a laughing face before the wind took it away. Yandolf walked on without looking back. Luck was with him still. He could feel it. But it felt heavier now. Not like a gift, but a debt coming due. He flipped a coin as he walked. It spun, caught the light, and vanished into the long grass. He didn't bother to look for it. The empire rolled on without him. Caravans rattled, nobles schemed, wars brewed in the distance, and through it all, Yandolf Hertler walked the long roads with a half-empty flask and a full heart of ghosts. He never stayed long anywhere. In Wissenland, he cured a burgomeister's mystery illness by replacing his wine with goat's milk. In Stirland, he convinced a band of grave robbers that their shovels were cursed. In Reichland, he stole a bishop's ring, pawned it, and donated the proceeds to an orphanage, leaving the bishop's purse heavier than before, so the man thought it a miracle. Ranald's work, as ever, done with sleight of hand. But as the months passed, laughter came harder. Luck clung to him like a shadow, still there, still loyal, but somehow colder. Every toss of his dice came perfect. Every gamble paid, and each win felt like a weight added to his back. No one trusted a man that lucky, not even himself. It was late autumn when he found himself in a nameless village by the River Ster. The place was poor, half drowned by mist, the kind of village that forgot to exist except when soldiers came through to take what was left. Yandolf stayed at a tumble-down inn called the Pig and Whistle, where the ale was thin but the roof mostly held. The innkeeper, a widow named Elspeth, looked him over like a stray dog, too clever for comfort. You've the look of a man running from something, she said on his first night. Yandolf smiled. Aren't we all? He paid in silver, though his coin pouch should have been empty. She didn't ask how. Over the next week he helped mend fences, mixed medicines for coughing children, and repaired her husband's old dice board by the hearth. The villagers began to call him Brother Luck. He didn't correct them. For the first time in years he thought maybe he could stop. Then came the strangers, 3 of them, cloaked and silent, arriving one cold night with the storm. They spoke little, paid in gold, and carried the scent of the city and of knives. Yandolf knew what they were before they even looked at him. Rinaldians, not the kind who prayed with cards, but the kind who prayed with blood. When the inn closed for the night, the tallest of them approached his table. Yandolf Hertler, he said softly. High brothers send their regards. Yandolf didn't flinch. I was beginning to think they'd forgotten me. You burned our den, the man said. You killed Kelvin. Kelvin killed himself, Yandolf said quietly. He just didn't realize it until too late. The man smiled beneath his hood. You've had your run, priest. The god's laughter ends tonight. Yandolf sighed, finishing his drink. Then I'd best make it a good punchline. They came for him in the rain. The inn was asleep, the fire low, the storm pounding like war drums on the roof. Yandolf sat by the hearth, coin in hand, rolling it between his fingers. When the first blade came for his throat, he moved, faster than luck should allow. The chair toppled as he ducked, slamming his attacker into the wall. A second man lunged. Yandolf threw a vial from his belt, a sleeping draught meant for stubborn patience. It shattered on the floor, a cloud of sweet-smelling smoke filling the room. Ranald's grace, Yandolf muttered, coughing. The third man came through the haze, tall, silent, deliberate. His dagger caught Yandolf's sleeve, slicing flesh. The pain was white, sharp, real. For the first time in years, Yandolf's luck missed. He stumbled back, tripping on the dice board by the hearth. Coins scattered, dice rolled. He hit the floor hard. The attacker stood over him, knife raised. Ranald laughs last, the man hissed. Yandolf smiled through the blood. Then let him laugh now. He kicked the board. The dice flew, clattering across the floor, spinning, spinning, until they stopped. Double sixes. The floorboards gave way. The old cellar, half rotted from damp, collapsed under them. Both men plunged into darkness and dust. Yandolf landed hard, pain lancing through his leg. The other man didn't rise. He lay there a long while, staring up at the broken ceiling, rain dripping through the hole. His breath came ragged, shallow, the smell of blood mixed with wine and dirt. Ranald, he whispered, I think that's my last good throw. Somewhere above, thunder rolled, a deep, rolling laugh. Morning came grey and silent. The villagers found him half conscious amid the wreckage. They carried him upstairs, bound his leg, tended his wounds. He smiled faintly through the pain. You'll live, Elsbeth told him. You're lucky. He chuckled weakly. That's what they tell me. For several days he drifted in and out of fevered sleep. He dreamed of dice and coins, of laughter that turned to sobbing, of Maria's face and of Ranald. Smiling, always smiling. One night he woke to find a figure sitting beside the bed. It was Calvin, or rather, it looked like him, younger, cleaner, eyes bright with mischief. The ghost, if ghost it was, poured him a cup of water. You've had quite a run, lad, it said. Ranald's proud of you. Yandolf groaned. You again. I thought you'd retired. Kelvin chuckled. I did. Death's just a quieter tavern. Is this it? Yandolf asked. The end? Kelvin shrugged. For some, for others, just another joke. He leaned closer. Tell me, Yandolf, after all the tricks, all the running, do you still believe? Yandolf stared at the ceiling. I believe in laughter, in luck, in making fools of fools. If that's Ranald, then I believe. Kelvin grinned. Good answer. He stood, the shadows swallowing him. Then laugh, priest. Laugh while you can. And then he was gone. At dawn, Yandolf Hertler rose for the last time. The village was quiet, the mist lifting from the river. He limped outside, leaning on a staff, and stood by the old bridge. The world smelled of wet stone and distant rain. He took out his coin, the same one he'd carried since the gutters of Middenheim, tarnished but unbroken. One more, old friend, he said softly. One last toss. He flipped it. It spun, gleaming in the sunrise, higher than it ever had before, and vanished into the river below. Yandolf smiled. "Ranald," he whispered, "you always did keep the best jokes for yourself." He laughed, quietly, freely, and for the first time in years without bitterness. And somewhere far above, carried on the morning wind, came laughter in reply. Whether god or ghost, no one could say. Years later, travellers passing through the Riverster village sometimes heard strange stories. Of a ragged priest who'd cured the sick and cheated death. Of a coin that surfaced in the mud every spring, always resting perfectly on its edge. They said it was luck. They said it was faith. They said it was Ranald's last laugh, and maybe, just maybe, it was Yandolf's too.